The Nevada desert at 2 in the morning is colder than my father's heart. And trust me, that is saying something. I stood under the flickering neon sign of an abandoned Sunoco gas station, shivering in my $2,000 silk jacket. The air smelled of dry sagebrush and old gasoline. According to the dark web forum where I had spent a ridiculous amount of cryptocurrency 3 days ago, my hired thug was supposed to meet me here exactly 10 minutes ago. The plan was brilliantly simple. I would hire a professional criminal to stage my kidnapping, send a bloody ransom photo to my father, Richard Vance, and finally force the ruthless billionaire to pay attention to me. Even if it was just to pay a ransom, it would prove he actually cared. After the money was transferred to an offshore account, my kidnapper would let me go, and I would start a new life far away from the stifling, golden cage of the Vance empire. Gravel crunched in the darkness. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs. A shadow detached itself from the edge of the desert. As the man stepped into the sickly yellow light of the broken street lamp, my breath caught in my throat. He was massive, easily 6'4", with shoulders wide enough to block out the moon. Tattoos snaked up his muscular arms, disappearing under a tight black t-shirt. But it was his face that made my Omega instincts scream at me to drop to my knees. A jagged, brutal scar slashed across his left cheek, giving him the look of a seasoned killer. And then his pheromones hit me. It was a thick, intoxicating wave of pure alpha dominance. I expected the smell of stale beer or sweat from a dark web mercenary. Instead, he smelled like sharp gunsmoke heavily layered with the warm, rich scent of nutmeg. It was confusingly domestic, but overwhelmingly dangerous. I forced my chin up, channeling my best arrogant air persona to mask the trembling in my knees. I had to establish dominance. I was the client. "You are late," I snapped, tapping my Rolex. "I am paying you a premium for efficiency. Did you bring the zip ties?" The giant blinked. His dark eyes scanned me from head to toe, taking in my designer clothes and my manicured appearance. He looked deeply confused, then exasperated. "Zip ties," his voice was a low, gravelly rumble that sent a shiver straight down my spine. "Listen, kid. I was told the contact would be waiting here with the transport. Are you the guy or not?" I frowned. Transport. Maybe that was underground slang for the getaway car. Yes, obviously I am the guy. But we need to make the call first. We have to set the stage before we leave. He checked his watch, his jaw clenching. "We do not have time to set any stages. They are 10 minutes behind me. Just show me the vehicle." I scoffed, crossing my arms. "Nobody is looking for me yet. Now, stand there and look menacing. I am calling my father." Before the alpha could protest, I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial. I cleared my throat, ready to deliver my panicked hostage performance. The line connected. "Dad," I said, injecting a slight tremble into my voice. "Dad, they took me. I am blindfolded. They want 10 million or they are going to kill me." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end, then the cold, flat voice of Richard Vance echoed from the speaker. "Carter, I am looking at your GPS signal right now. You are standing outside an abandoned Sunoco gas station on Route 95. My stomach dropped. I looked down at my wrist. The vintage Rolex. He had put a tracker in it. "Dad, I can explain," I stammered, the arrogant air facade crumbling instantly. "Do not bother," my father interrupted, his tone devoid of any emotion. "You want to play the runaway victim? Fine. I have frozen all your credit cards, your bank accounts, and your trust fund. You currently have $0 to your name. Let us see how long you survive in the dirt before you come crawling back. Do not call this number again." The line went dead. I stood there frozen, the phone slipping from my grasp, cut off. I was completely cut off. No money, no safety net, nothing. I was just a spoiled 22-year-old standing in the middle of nowhere. "Hey," the giant alpha growled, stepping closer. "What the hell was that? Who did you just call?" Before I could answer, the roar of heavy engines shattered the desert silence. At the edge of the highway, 3 black SUVs with their headlights killed came tearing through the dust, heading straight for our gas station. The alpha swore violently. In a flash of movement, he pulled a massive, terrifyingly sharp chef's knife from his belt. "A chef's knife? Who brings a kitchen tool to a gunfight?" "The Tsar's men," he hissed, grabbing my arm with a grip like irons. "Where is the transport kid? Tell me now." I don't have a car. I took an Uber here," I screamed, panic finally taking completely over. "An Uber?" he roared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Gunfire erupted. Bullets chewed through the neon sign above us, showering us in sparks and glass. "Run," he yelled, shoving me forward. We sprinted behind the rusted shell of the gas station. There was only one vehicle in sight. It was a battered, grease-stained food truck with a faded picture of a taco on the side. The tires were half flat, and the engine hood was slightly ajar. "Get in," I yelled, diving into the driver's seat. The keys were missing, obviously. "It is dead, you idiot," the Alpha shouted, ducking as a bullet shattered the truck's side mirror. "Cover me," I yelled back. My hands moved entirely on instinct. No one in my family knew this, but I did not spend my weekends at country clubs. I spent them in underground garages, covered in motor oil. I ripped the ignition panel open, my fingers flying over the wires. Red to blue. Strip the green, spark. The engine cough sputtered and roared to life with a sound like a dying dinosaur. "Hold on," I screamed, slamming the gear shift. I slammed my foot on the gas. The heavy, rusted food truck lurched forward, smashing through the rotten wooden fence of the gas station and barreling blindly out into the pitch-black Nevada desert. We were alive, but I was broke, completely terrified, and trapped in a rolling grease trap with a giant Alpha who smelled like murder and baking spices. The rusted food truck chugged its last miserable breath just as the Nevada sun began to peek over the jagged horizon. With a violent shudder and a pathetic hiss of steam, the engine died completely. We coasted into the gravel parking lot of a dilapidated motel in a town so small it didn't even warrant a welcome sign. On the highway, I slammed my forehead against the steering wheel, my heart still racing from our narrow escape. Silence descended upon the cabin, broken only by the ticking of the cooling, overheated engine. "All right, kids," the giant Alpha beside me growled, his voice dangerously low. He wiped a streak of grease from his scarred cheek. "Who exactly are you? And why did the Tsar's men just shoot up my only ticket out of the state?" I lifted my head, running a trembling hand through my messy hair. There was no point in lying anymore. My father had cut me off, and my grand kidnapping scheme was a bust. "My name is Carter Vance," I admitted, my voice lacking its usual arrogant bite. "I am, or was, the heir to Vance Real Estate. I hired a dark web thug to stage my kidnapping." "I thought you were him." The Alpha stared at me for a long, painful moment. His dark eyes widened in sheer disbelief. You staged a kidnapping? With a guy you met on the dark web?" He rubbed his temples as if trying to stave off a massive headache. "I am Jackson Callahan. Everyone calls me Jax. I was supposed to meet a smuggler to cross the border. I am currently running from Viktor the Tsar Volkov, head of the West Coast Russian syndicate." My jaw dropped. "Wait, you are a real mobster, a hitman?" "I am a cleaner," Jax corrected defensively. "And technically, I used to be a chef. Until Victor ordered me to poison a perfectly executed beef Wellington to kill a rival boss. You do not ruin a prime cut of tenderloin with cyanide. It is a culinary sin." I refused, smashed the kitchen and ran. I stared at the terrifying, scarred Alpha. "You have a hit on your head over a piece of beef." "It was a Wellington, Carter. It is about principles." Jax deadpanned. He sighed, looking out at the deserted, dusty town. "We need gas and parts. And I am assuming, since your daddy cut you off, your pockets are as empty as mine." I pulled out my silk pockets, empty. Not a dime. Jax unbuckled his seatbelt and climbed into the back of the food truck. I followed him into the cramped, grease-coated kitchen area. Miraculously, the backup battery was still humming, keeping the chest freezer cold. Jax threw open the lid. Inside were vacuum-sealed packs of marinated pork, fresh cilantro onions, and stacks of corn tortillas. "We cook," Jax announced, picking up his massive chef's knife. "Are you insane?" I scoffed. "We are fugitives. Fugitives who need cash," he countered. "You said you knew cars. Can you fix the engine?" I looked at my ruined $2,000 silk jacket. I stripped it off, tying it carelessly around my waist, and rolled up the sleeves of my dress shirt. "I need an hour. But this whole setup is a disaster." I grabbed a rusted toolbox I found under the counter and crawled beneath the truck. The smell of hot asphalt and engine oil was oddly comforting. For the first time in my life, no bodyguards were hovering, and no one was judging my dirty hands. I worked quickly, tightening belts and patching hoses. "Jax," I yelled from under the chassis. "Who the hell rigged this propane system? It's a death trap. The gas pressure valve is completely stripped. If I don't bypass this regulator and reroute the emergency release, the next time you turn on the stove, we are going to blow up half this town. Just make it safe." "Carter," Jax shouted back from inside. I grabbed my wrench and started modifying the valve, intentionally overriding the safety cap to give it a manual pressure release. It wasn't standard protocol, but it would keep us from exploding today. When I finally climbed out from under the truck, covered in black grease and dirt, I froze. Jax was standing at the grill. The massive, heavily tattooed Russian mafia cleaner was wearing a faded, neon pink apron that said "Kiss the Cook" in sparkly letters. The apron was comically small, barely covering his broad chest, but his face was completely serious. His knife skills were mesmerizing, a blur of steel dicing onions and cilantro with surgical precision. Suddenly, the scent of sizzling pork hit the air, carrying with it a spike of his pheromones. Gun smoke and nutmeg. It hit my senses hard, forcing a breathless gasp from my throat. My own scent, vanilla and motor oil, flared in response, filling the cramped space. Jax paused, his eyes darkening as he looked at me. "Engine fixed?" he asked, his voice an octave lower than before. "Why, yes," I stammered, wiping my greasy face, acutely aware of the sudden tension crackling between us. "It will run. We just need gas." By nightfall, the smell of Jax's tacos had drifted down the main street. We propped open the service window to my shop. A line actually started to form: trucker, local drunks, and insomniacs. I stood at the register taking cash, while Jax worked the grill like a maestro. Then, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the lot. My blood ran cold. The door opened, and a lanky deputy with a badge that read Travis stepped out. He ambled toward our window. I glanced at Jax. His hand was resting dangerously close to his knife, the pink apron doing nothing to hide the sudden tension in his massive shoulders. "Evening," Deputy Travis drawled, adjusting his belt. He sniffed the air. "Smells like heaven. Give me 3 tacos, extra spicy." "Coming right up, officer," I managed to say, forcing a customer service smile. Travis leaned against the counter sighing. "Long night. State police got us on high alert. All points bulletin out on some Russian mob enforcer. 6'4", huge scar on his face. Extremely dangerous, honestly. I hope he doesn't come through my town. I hate paperwork." I swallowed hard. Jax handed over the paper plate of tacos, his scarred face completely impassive. "Enjoy your meal, sir." Travis took a bite. His eyes widened comically. "Mother of God," he mumbled, sauce dripping down his chin. "This is the best damn thing I've ever eaten. You guys are going to be famous." He slapped a $20 bill on the counter and walked away, happily oblivious to the fact that he just tipped the most dangerous man in Nevada. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and looked at Jax. The tension broke, and to my absolute surprise, a deep, rumbling laugh erupted from Jax's chest. I couldn't help it, I started laughing too, wiping a tear from my eye with a grease-stained finger. As we served the next customer, I didn't notice the teenager standing by the motel vending machine. I didn't notice him holding up his smartphone, the camera lens focused squarely on the giant, scarred man in the pink apron flipping meat with impossible flair. We were making money. We were surviving, but our anonymity was about to expire. I woke up to the sound of aggressive scrubbing. My neck cracked as I lifted my head from the passenger seat, groaning at the stiffness in my spine. Sleeping in a rusted food truck was exactly as glamorous as it sounded. I blinked the sleep from my eyes and peered into the cramped kitchen. Jax was awake. He had traded his pink Kiss the Cook apron for a plain black one, but that was not what caught my attention. The massive, terrifying Russian hitman was currently scrubbing the tiny stainless steel prep counter with a bottle of industrial-grade chemical solvent. He wiped the metal with such intense, methodical precision that I could practically see my own messy reflection in it. "Morning," I mumbled, stretching my sore arms. "Are you preparing to cook breakfast or perform open-heart surgery?" Jax did not look up, his jaw set in a hard line. This kitchen was a biological hazard, Carter. I am a professional. I cannot work in filth. When I leave a scene, there is no trace left behind, not blood, not fingerprints, and definitely not stale taco grease. I stared at him. He was literally applying his mafia cleaner habits to a roadside taco stand. Before I could point out the absolute absurdity of this aloud, rhythmic pounding echoed from the side of the truck. I peeked through the service window blind and nearly had a heart attack. There was a massive, winding line of at least 50 people standing in the gravel parking lot, chattering excitedly under the harsh morning sun. Teenagers with smartphones, truckers, and tourists. "Jax," I whispered, panic squeezing my chest. "Why is half the state of Nevada outside our truck?" I threw open the service window. Immediately, a teenage girl shoved a phone in my face. On the screen was a video from last night. It showed Jax, looking like an absolute menace with his scarred face and giant biceps, aggressively flipping meat on the grill while wearing that ridiculous pink apron. The caption read, "Found the final boss of street food. Bad boy taco daddy." 2 million views. The girl squealed. Are you guys open yet? Can he yell at me when he takes my order? I slammed the window shut, my back hitting the metal wall. We are viral. We are a viral sensation on TikTok, Jack. Your face is on the internet. Jax dropped his chemical spray. The color drained from his already pale face. The czar. He breathed. He has people monitoring social media. If they run facial recognition, we have to pack up and leave now, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrambled toward the driver's seat, but Jax grabbed my arm, stopping me. We have exactly $42, Carter, he said, his voice surprisingly calm despite the crisis. A full tank of gas for this beast costs $150. We cannot run on empty. We have to serve them. We work for 2 hours, take the cash, and we vanish. He was right, I hated it, but he was right. I tied my ruined silk jacket around my waist again, took a deep breath, and opened the window. Welcome. I forced a blinding customer service smile. Cash only. The next 2 hours were the most bizarre experience of my privileged life. The crowd was relentless, but what was even more shocking was how Jax handled them. The terrifying mafia enforcer refused to serve anyone unless they sanitized their hands first. He stood at the window, glaring down at a burly, bearded biker. Show me your palms, Jax growled, his deep voice carrying a lethal edge. You touched the motel vending machine, disgusting. Use the antibacterial gel, or you get no pork. The biker, a man who looked like he regularly bar-brawled for fun, meekly squirted pink sanitizer into his hands. Why yes sir, sorry sir. I watched in pure fascination. Jax was intimidating people into basic hygiene, and the internet-obsessed crowd absolutely loved it. They thought it was a brilliant performance. Little did they know, the man slicing their limes with a literal surgical scalpel, because his chef's knife was contaminated, had probably disposed of more bodies than the local cemetery. As we worked side by side in the tiny kitchen, the sweltering heat of the grill combined with the desert sun began to turn the truck into an oven. I was sweating profusely, my hands covered in cash and grease. I stumbled, feeling a sudden wave of dizziness wash over me. Instantly, a strong arm wrapped around my waist, steadying me. I looked up. Jax was incredibly close. His dark eyes searched my face with genuine concern, completely ignoring the line of customers outside. The scent of gun smoke and nutmeg wrapped around me, thick and protective. It made my pulse race, but not from fear. My omega instincts flared a sudden, dangerous heat pooling in my lower stomach. The vanilla and motor oil scent of my own pheromones spiked, filling the small space between us. You are pale, Jax murmured, his thumb gently brushing a smudge of dirt from my cheek. His touch was shockingly tender for a man with hands like cinder blocks. Drink some water. I will handle the front. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight. For a brief second, I completely forgot about my father, the hitman, and the ticking clock. There was just this giant, scarred alpha who cared more about my well-being than his own safety. Hey taco boys. The spell broke. We both snapped our heads toward the window. Deputy Travis was leaning against the counter, holding 2 cups of iced coffee. Brought you a peace offering. Travis smiled, handing me a cup. Figured you needed it with this crazy crowd. Man, the station has been an absolute madhouse today. Oh, Jax asked, his tone carefully neutral. Why is that, deputy? Travis took off his hat, wiping his brow. Craziest coincidence. Just an hour ago, some fancy corporate lawyers from Los Angeles called. Said they are looking for a runaway blonde kid in a vintage Rolex, offering a massive cash reward. My stomach plummeted to my shoes. My father's men. And if that wasn't weird enough, Travis continued, completely oblivious to our rising panic. State troopers just flagged a convoy of 3 black SUVs crossing the county line, apparently. A bunch of heavily armed, angry Russians are tearing up the highway, asking every gas station about a food truck. Travis laughed, slapping the metal counter. Can you imagine? It is like a movie. Anyway, I gotta get back on patrol. Stay safe out here, boys. He walked away, sipping his coffee. I slowly turned to look at Jax. The tender domesticity of the morning was gone, replaced by the chilling reality of our situation. We had the gas money, but time had just run out. They knew exactly where we were, and they were coming. We did not just pack up, we practically tore the service window off its hinges. Jax threw the truck into gear, and we barreled out of the dusty motel parking lot just as the distant wail of sirens began to echo across the desert. We did not take the highway. Instead, Jax veered off onto a forgotten dirt road, driving us miles into the barren wilderness until we were completely hidden behind a massive, jagged rock formation. When he finally killed the engine, the silence of the desert was deafening. "We stay here until nightfall," Jack said, his voice tight. He was already checking the locks on the heavy metal doors, his hitman instincts fully activated. "If we move in the daylight, the Tsar's men or your father's corporate goons will spot this rusted tin can from a mile away." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was sitting on the floor of the cabin, the heavy metal engine cover propped open between the two front seats so I could access the distributor cap. But my hands were trembling so violently I dropped my wrench. It started as a sudden, suffocating flush at the base of my neck. Within seconds, it spread through my bloodstream like wildfire. My skin felt like it was burning from the inside out, and my breathing grew shallow and ragged. The crushing stress of the last 24 hours, the sheer terror of being hunted, and the adrenaline crash had completely short-circuited my biology. I was going into heat early, in the middle of the desert, trapped in a metal box with a lethal alpha. Instantly, the air inside the cramped truck grew heavy. My pheromones exploded into the confined space, a thick, intoxicating cloud of sweet vanilla cut with the sharp tang of motor oil. I heard a sharp intake of breath from the back of the truck. I looked up. Jax was frozen halfway between the kitchen and the cab. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the dark irises completely. The veins in his massive forearms bulged as his hands gripped the edge of the prep counter so hard the metal groaned. His alpha scent, gunsmoke and nutmeg, spiked aggressively, rolling over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Every biological instinct I had screamed at me to submit, to bare my neck and let the giant alpha consume me. But I was advanced, and I was extremely annoyed. "Do not," I gasped, glaring at him through the hazy fever clouding my vision. I picked up my greasy wrench and pointed it at him like a weapon. "Do not even think about it, Callahan. I have to replace these spark plug wires before the sun sets, or this piece of junk will never start again." Jax let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated in my chest. He took one step forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over me. "Carter." His voice was barely a whisper, ragged and entirely driven by instinct. "You are burning up. You need..." "I need a 10mm socket," I snapped, wiping a bead of sweat that stung my eye, smearing black grease across my forehead. "Back off. My fever is ruining my focus, and your staring is not helping." Jax stopped. He stared at me, a delicate, shivering omega covered in dirt and engine fluid, aggressively commanding him to stay away while practically radiating an invitation. A muscle feathered in his jaw. I could see the brutal internal war playing out on his scarred face, the mafia enforcer's lethal discipline clashing violently with his primal alpha biology. Slowly, agonizingly, he took a step back. "Okay," Jax breathed, his chest heaving. "Okay. You fix the engine. I will fix this." He spun around and practically ran back into the tiny kitchen area. I heard the frantic clatter of pots and pans, the aggressive chopping of a knife, and the hiss of the gas stove. I turned back to the engine, my vision swimming. It took me 3 tries to connect the right wires, my body aching with a deep, hollow need. Every time I shifted, the friction of my clothes sent sparks of agonizing pleasure through my skin. It was pure torture. 45 minutes later, I managed to snap the engine cover shut. I slumped against the passenger door, utterly exhausted, my chest rising and falling heavily. "Drink this." I forced my eyes open. Jax was kneeling beside me. He had taken off his apron and his black t-shirt, his bare, tattooed chest glistening with sweat in the sweltering heat of the truck. In his massive hands, he held a steaming bowl of dark, rich broth. "What is it?" I rasped. "Borscht, but modified," he said softly, his voice still incredibly tight with restraint. "It is packed with ginger garlic and an insane amount of capsaicin from the peppers we had left. It will spike your body temperature even higher for a few minutes, shock your nervous system, and force the fever to break. A culinary cold shower." I was too weak to take the bowl. Jax realized this immediately. With infinite care, the terrifying Russian hitman scooped a spoonful of the spicy red liquid, blew on it to cool it down, and brought it to my lips. I swallowed. It tasted like fire in heaven. The spice hit the back of my throat, sending a jolt of pure energy through my lethargic limbs. For the next hour, Jax patiently fed me the soup, wiping the sweat from my brow with a cool, damp cloth. True to his word, the intense spice forced my body to sweat out the sudden hormonal spike. The suffocating haze of the heat slowly began to recede, leaving me drained but clear-headed. Outside, the desert sun finally dipped below the horizon, plunging the world into a cool, starry darkness. "Thank you," I whispered, resting my head against the cool glass of the window. Jack sat on the floor opposite me, his long legs stretched out, our knees barely touching in the cramped space. The aggressive alpha scent in the air had mellowed into a warm, comforting presence. "I have killed 27 men, Carter," Jack said suddenly, staring at his own calloused hands. The confession hung in the quiet air, heavy and raw. "I have broken bones, destroyed lives, and cleaned up scenes so horrific they give me nightmares. Victor took me in when I was a street kid, and he turned me into a monster." He looked up, his dark eyes vulnerable in the dim light of the dashboard. "I thought cooking was my only way to create something instead of destroying it. Until I met you." My heart squeezed tight. I reached out, my grease-stained fingers gently touching his scarred cheek. He leaned into my palm instantly, closing his eyes. "I lived in a mansion with 30 rooms," I said softly, "and I have never felt like I had a home. My father had my entire life planned out until I was 80. What to wear, who to smile at, what corporate empire I would inherit. I love machines, Jax, because they make sense. If something is broken, you can fix it. You just need the right tools." I slid from the passenger seat down to the floor, settling directly into his arms. He wrapped his massive arms around me immediately, pulling my back flush against his broad chest. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. "We are both a little broken," I whispered, closing my eyes as his steady heartbeat thumped against my spine. "Then we will fix each other," Jax murmured, his lips pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my scent gland. We fell asleep there on the floor of the food truck, surrounded by the smell of grease spices, and each other. It was the most peaceful night of my life. But as the desert wind howled outside, we both knew tomorrow would bring fire blood, and the final reckoning. The desert cold is what woke me. I shivered, blinking against the pale, pre-dawn light filtering through the greasy windshield of the food truck. I reached out, my fingers searching for the solid, radiating warmth of the giant alpha who had held me all night. My hand met cold, empty linoleum. I sat up instantly, the remnants of sleep vanishing from my brain. The cramped cabin was quiet, but I could hear the faint, metallic click-clack of a weapon being loaded in the kitchen area. I pushed myself off the floor, my muscles aching, and peered around the prep counter. Jax was standing by the back door. He had his black t-shirt back on, a customized Glock holstered at his hip, and 2 spare magazines tucked into his belt. He was quietly zipping up a small canvas duffel bag. The heavy, protective scent of nutmeg and gunsmoke that usually surrounded him was completely retracted, locked down tight. He was preparing for war, and he was preparing to do it alone. "What do you think you're doing?" I asked, my voice raspy but sharp enough to slice glass. Jax froze. He didn't turn around immediately. When he finally did, his scarred face was a mask of cold, professional detachment. The gentle alpha who had spoon-fed me soup just hours ago was gone, replaced entirely by the Tsar's lethal cleaner. "I am leaving," Jax said flatly. "I am going to hike 2 miles east, find high ground, and fire a flare. Victor's men will see it. They will track me, not the truck. Once they are engaged, you take the truck and drive west. Do not stop until you hit the California border." I stared at him, my brain trying to process the absolute audacity of his plan. "You are going to act as bait." "I am going to fix the problem," he corrected. "Victor wants my head for disrespecting his order. Your father just wants his heir back. If I am gone, your father's men will find you eventually, and you will be safe. It is the most logical tactical decision." The sheer, infuriating arrogance of his logical tactical decision ignited a fury inside me hotter than any fever. I was an Omega, yes, but I was also a Vance. We did not do passive. My eyes darted to the floor. The 10mm socket wrench I had dropped yesterday was lying by my boot. I picked it up, and with every ounce of strength I had, I hurled it straight at him. Clang! The heavy steel wrench missed his head by an inch, smashing into the stainless steel refrigerator door behind him and leaving a massive dent before clattering to the floor. Jax flinched, his dark eyes snapping wide in genuine shock. "Are you out of your mind? Are you?" I screamed, marching right up to his towering frame, ignoring the fact that he was armed to the teeth and a foot taller than me. "You self-righteous, martyring idiot. I did not spend 3 hours suffocating in engine grease and rewiring a stripped distributor cap just so you could go commit suicide in the dirt. Carter, you do not understand what the Tsar's men are capable of. And you do not understand what I am capable of." I shoved his broad chest with both hands. It was like pushing a brick wall, but he stumbled back a step anyway, purely out of surprise. "We fixed this truck together. We ran this stupid taco stand together. If you step 1 foot out that door, Callahan, I swear to God, I will manually ignite the propane tank and blow this rusted piece of junk to the moon. You will not have anything left to protect. We stood inches apart, both of us breathing heavily. I glared up at him, my chest heaving. I expected him to push me away, to use his alpha command, to force me to submit to his plan. Instead, the cold, Hitman mask completely shattered. Jax let out a ragged breath, the sound tearing from his throat like a surrender. He dropped his duffel bag. In one swift, desperate motion, his massive hands reached out and cupped my face. His thumbs brushed over my cheekbones, smearing the leftover engine grease. His dark eyes searching mine with a terrifying intensity. You are absolutely crazy, he whispered, his voice shaking. I am a mechanic. I breathed back, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I fix things, including broken assassins. He didn't hesitate anymore. Jax ducked his head and captured my lips. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It tasted like coffee, lingering spices and raw, unfiltered desperation. There was no heat haze, no pheromone-induced delirium this time. This was a conscious, reckless choice. I tangled my fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer, kissing him back with every ounce of stubborn loyalty I possessed. His arms wrapped completely around my waist, lifting me slightly off the floor, anchoring me against the storm. For that one perfect minute, the rest of the world ceased to exist. Then, the ground began to vibrate. It started as a low tremor against the soles of my boots, then quickly built into a deep, guttural rumble that shook the thin metal walls of the food truck. Jax broke the kiss instantly, his hitman instincts snapping back to attention. He set me down and lunged for the windshield, peering around the edge of the jagged rock formation that hid us. I rushed to his side, looking out over the dashboard. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the desert in harsh shades of orange and blood red. To the east, kicking up a massive plume of white dust, a convoy of 3 sleek, armored black SUVs was tearing across the dirt road. My father's corporate security. I swallowed hard. Jax. Look west, he interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous, gravelly register. I looked. Coming from the opposite direction, moving with aggressive, terrifying speed, were 2 heavily modified, matte black tactical trucks mounted with off-road lights. The Tsar's men. We had not been tracked by just one enemy. They had both found us at the exact same time. The 2 convoys slammed on their brakes as they reached the clearing, forming a perfect, hostile semicircle around our hiding spot. The screech of tires and the slamming of heavy car doors echoed through the canyon. We were completely trapped. The circle had closed. Jax reached down, picking up his dropped duffel bag. He racked the slide of his Glock, the metallic sound ringing with finality. He looked at me, a sharp, lethal smile playing on his lips, the smile of a man who had stopped running. Well, kid, Jax said, handing me a heavy cast iron frying pan from the stove. Looks like we are serving breakfast. I gripped the handle of the cast iron frying pan so hard my knuckles turned white. Outside the food truck, the dust settled to reveal a Mexican standoff of absurd proportions. On our left, half a dozen men in sharp, tailored suits stepped out of the black SUVs. My father's corporate security team. On our right, heavily armed men in tactical gear poured out of the matte black trucks. The Tsar's Russian syndicate. We were caught directly in the crossfire. Callahan, a booming voice echoed from the Russian side. A massive man with a shaved head and a gold tooth stepped forward, leveling an assault rifle at our rusted windshield. The Tsar sent his regards, and his disappointment regarding the Wellington. Before I could even process the ridiculousness of a mob hit starting over a beef pastry, the world exploded into chaos. The Russian fired. Crack, crack, crack. Bullets tore through the thin aluminum walls of the food truck like paper. Glass shattered, raining down on us. Jax grabbed my waist, tackling me to the greasy linoleum floor just as a volley of gunfire shredded the exact spot where we had been standing. Stay down, Jax roared over the deafening noise. The corporate security team, assuming they were being fired upon by the Russians, immediately returned fire. Suddenly, a full-blown turf war erupted over our heads. The crossfire was deafening, a symphony of ricocheting metal and screaming men. But the Russians were advancing, closing in on the truck. Jax didn't pull his Glock. Instead, his dark eyes scanned our tiny, wrecked kitchen. His hitman instincts merged violently with his culinary obsession. He grabbed a stainless steel meat cleaver in one hand and a bottle of high-proof cooking sherry in the other. Jax, what are you doing? I yelled, covering my ears. Serving the appetizer, he growled. He kicked the heavy back door of the food truck open and launched himself into the fray. I crawled toward the door, peeking out, my heart in my throat. It was a terrifying, mesmerizing ballet of violence. A Russian thug lunged at Jax with a tactical knife. Jax sidestepped smoothly, smashed the bottle of sherry over the man's helmet, and hit him in the chest with a devastating roundhouse kick. Another mercenary aimed a pistol at him. Faster than I could blink, Jax threw the meat cleaver. It spun through the air, the heavy blunt handle striking the man squarely in the forehead with a sickening thud, knocking him out cold. Jax fought like a demon, using the truck as a shield, disabling 3 more men with brutal efficiency. But there were simply too many of them. "Bring out the RPG," the gold-toothed Russian yelled from behind the tactical truck. "Blow the shaft to pieces." My blood ran cold. An RPG. They were going to obliterate the truck, Jax and me. Jax ducked behind the rear tire, pinned down by a fresh wave of suppression fire. He looked at me through the open door, his chest heaving, his scarred face tight with grim realization. We were out of time. My Omega instinct screamed at me to hide. But the mechanic in me looked at the heavy, commercial-grade propane tank strapped to the back of the kitchen counter. The regulator valve. I hadn't just fixed it in Act 2. I had bypassed the safety lock. "Jax," I screamed at the top of my lungs, "get down." Flat on the ground. Jax didn't hesitate. He dropped flat into the desert dirt. I scrambled to the propane tank. My hands were shaking, slick with sweat and grease, but muscle memory took over. I grabbed the 10mm wrench I had thrown at Jax earlier. I jammed it onto the emergency pressure valve and cranked it all the way open. Hiss. A massive jet of highly pressurized, highly flammable propane gas violently shot out of the truck's exterior exhaust vent, spraying directly toward the advancing line of Russian mercenaries. I grabbed the click lighter we used for the grill, lunged toward the open service window, and struck the trigger right into the hissing gas stream. Fwim. The ignition was spectacular, a roar. 30-foot wall of pure orange fire erupted from the side of the truck. It looked like a dragon had just breathed across the Nevada desert. The intense heat blasted me backward. Outside, the Russians screamed in sheer panic, dropping their weapons and scrambling away from the inferno. The wall of fire completely cut them off, melting the front bumper of their tactical truck and forcing them into a chaotic retreat. I lay on my back, coughing through the thick black smoke, my ears ringing. Suddenly, the heavy metal door of the food truck was ripped open. A man stepped inside. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing a $10,000 bespoke suit, completely unbothered by the smoke and the lingering flames. "Richard Vance, my father." "Enough of this ridiculous tantrum, Carter," my father said, his voice cold, flat, and dripping with authority. He stepped over the shattered plates and broken glass, looking at me as if I were a disappointing spreadsheet. "Your little stunt is over. My security has neutralized the rest of the Russians. Get in the car. We have a board meeting on Monday." I stared at the man who had controlled my entire life. I looked down at my grease-stained clothes, the dirt under my fingernails, and the heavy frying pan still clutched in my left hand. A shadow darkened the doorway behind my father. Jax pulled himself up into the truck. His black shirt was torn, his face was smeared with soot and blood, and he looked utterly exhausted. But his dark eyes instantly locked onto mine, filled with an unspoken, desperate question. My father didn't even look at Jax. "Leave the mercenary. He is garbage. Let the state police deal with him, come Carter." The heavy scent of vanilla and ozone filled the truck as my pheromones flared, not in submission but in unadulterated defiance. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling but my spine entirely straight. I looked my billionaire father dead in the eye. "No," I said quietly. My father blinked. It was the first time in his life someone had said that word to him. "Excuse me." I said no. I repeated, louder this time. I walked past my father, purposefully ignoring his outstretched hand. I went straight to the towering, bloodied mafia assassin. I dropped the frying pan. I reached out and took Jax's massive, dirt-covered hand, lacing my fingers tightly through his. Jax exhaled a shaky breath, his grip tightening around mine like a lifeline, his gunsmoke scent wrapping around me in absolute protection. "I resign as your heir," I told my father, my voice steady. "Keep the money. Keep the mansion. I have everything I need right here." Before Richard Vance could unleash his fury, the distant, unmistakable wail of police sirens pierced the desert air. Dozens of them. Deputy Travis had apparently called in the cavalry. The fire was dying down. The battle was over. And for the first time in 22 years, I was entirely, wonderfully free. The arrival of the Nevada State Police was less of a rescue and more of an absolute circus. Within minutes, the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the desert like a twisted disco. A dozen cruisers, 2 SWAT vans, and 1 very bewildered Deputy Travis swarmed the remains of our makeshift battlefield. The Tsar's men, disoriented by the propane explosion and outgunned by the incoming authorities, threw down their weapons in mass surrender. I stood beside the scorched food truck, my fingers still securely intertwined with Jax's massive, calloused hand. My father, Richard Vance, watched the police cuff the Russian mercenaries with an expression of mild distaste. He turned back to me, his cold eyes dropping to where my hand was locked with the bloodied, towering mafia cleaner. "You are making a monumental mistake, Carter," my father said, adjusting his perfectly tailored cuffs as if he hadn't just stood in the middle of a war zone. "If you walk away now, you are dead to the Vance empire. You will be penniless, a greasy mechanic sleeping in the dirt with a wanted criminal." "That is exactly the idea, Richard," I replied, my voice steady, completely devoid of the fear that used to choke me whenever he spoke. "And for the record, he is an exceptional chef." My father stared at me for a long, heavy moment. For 22 years, he had seen me as a fragile asset, a pawn to be moved across his corporate chessboard. But as I stood my ground, smelling of smoke engine oil and defiant omega pheromones, something shifted in his icy gaze. He didn't apologize. Men like Richard Vance never do. But as he turned on his heel to walk back to his armored SUV, I caught the faintest, almost imperceptible upwards twitch at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile of affection, it was a sociopathic acknowledgement of strength. He only respected power, and for the first time in my life, I had wielded it against him. "Let's go," my father barked to his security detail. They piled into the remaining intact SUVs and drove away, leaving me completely cut off, disinherited, and utterly elated. Jax squeezed my hand, letting out a breath that sounded like it had been held for a decade. He looked down at me, his face bruised and covered in soot. "You just threw away billions of dollars for a guy who smells like cheap sherry and gunpowder." "Don't flatter yourself, Callahan," I smirked, leaning my forehead against his muscular bicep. "I did it for the tacos." 6 months later, Los Angeles, California. The rhythmic, guttural roar of a restored V8 engine echoed through the open bay doors of the industrial warehouse. I slid out from under the chassis of a classic 1969 Mustang on my mechanic's creeper, wiping a streak of black grease off my forehead with the back of my wrist. I was wearing a faded pair of navy coveralls, my hair tied back, completely covered in dirt. I had never felt more attractive in my life. I sat up and looked across the mess. Open concept space. Welcome to the Spark and Cleaver. Half high-end custom auto garage, half premium steakhouse. It was the most ridiculous business model in the history of Los Angeles, and we were booked solid for the next 3 months. On the other side of the glass partition, the dining room was packed. Sizzling sounds and mouth-watering aromas drifted over the scent of motor oil, and there, standing at the center of the open exhibition kitchen, was Jax. He was a vision. He wore a crisp, tailored black chef's coat with the sleeves rolled up past his elbows, putting his terrifying Russian mafia tattoos on full display for the awestruck customers. He wasn't wielding a gun anymore. Instead, he commanded a pair of steel tongs and a massive chef's knife with the exact same lethal precision. The viral Bad Boy Taco Daddy video had given us the initial capital after the state police cleared Jax's record in exchange for his testimony that dismantled the Tsar's syndicate. From there, my mechanical skills and his Michelin-level culinary talent had built this empire from the ground up. I grabbed a clean rag, wiped my hands, and walked through the glass doors separating the garage from the restaurant. A few impeccably dressed customers gasped and whispered as I, a filthy mechanic, strolled right up to the glowing hot kitchen line. Jax was in the middle of plating a perfectly seared tomahawk ribeye, his face a mask of intense, intimidating focus. But the moment he saw me, the fearsome aura vanished entirely. His dark eyes softened into liquid velvet. The scent of nutmeg and warm hickory wood smoke, his alpha pheromones, completely stripped of their old danger, washed over me, instantly calming my racing pulse. "You missed a spot," Jax rumbled, his deep voice carrying over the chatter of the restaurant. He reached across the stainless steel pass. Using a pristine white kitchen towel, the giant, scarred alpha gently wiped a smudge of motor oil from my cheek. The contrast between his terrifying appearance and the absolute tenderness of his touch still made my breath catch every single time. "The Mustang's transmission is rebuilt," I told him, leaning into his touch, my own vanilla pheromones practically purring in the air between us. "What is the verdict on the tomahawk?" Jax didn't answer with words. He picked up his scalpel-sharp knife, sliced a perfect, medium-rare piece of the steak, and held it to my lips. I opened my mouth, taking the bite. The flavor exploded on my tongue, rich, savory, perfectly seasoned, and meltingly tender. I let out an involuntary groan of pure pleasure. Jax's pupils dilated, a possessive, territorial growl vibrating low in his chest at the sound I made. Keep making noises like that in the middle of the kitchen, Carter, and I am going to lock the doors and shut down service for the rest of the day. Promises, promises, I teased, reaching up to grab the lapels of his chef's coat. I pulled him down across the counter and kissed him, right there in front of a packed restaurant, food bloggers, and gearheads. He kissed me back fiercely, his massive hand cupping the back of my neck, grounding me. It tasted like expensive steak, hard work, and absolute freedom. When we finally broke apart, the dining room was dead silent, staring at us in shock. Jax slowly turned his head, leveling a terrifying, deadpan glare at the crowd. "What?" he growled. "Enjoy your steaks." The entire restaurant practically scrambled to look down at their plates, terrified and thrilled all at once. I laughed a genuine, chest-deep sound, and walked back toward my garage. I didn't have a trust fund anymore. I didn't have bodyguards, tailored silk suits, or a predetermined future. All I had was a toolbox, a greasy pair of coveralls, and a giant, heavily armed chef who worshipped the ground I walked on. I smiled, picking up my favorite 10mm wrench. It was the perfect formula.